So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming this evening. As I mentioned, I'm just stepping in for Shirin to host tonight, but I'm going to very quickly pass you along to Lauren so she can tell you all about ARCs. So, let me introduce Lauren to you. Lauren Kessler is a multi-award-winning author of 15 books spanning several genres, including narrative nonfiction, immersion reportage, memoir, and biography. She's taught writing and journalism at the University of Oregon and the University of Washington and the Forum of Journalism and Media in Vienna. She describes her latest book, Everything Changes Everything, as her most personal work yet. A story of love, devastating loss, and the unexpected clarity that can come from putting one foot in front of the other for 500 miles. And tonight, I know she's going to talk about the arc of that book and the arc of her other books. Lauren also writes essays and musings on beginnings, endings, and the shape we're in on her Substack, which is called Life After All. Lots of short pieces on there. And she's a firm believer that arc is foundational to all genres. And this evening, she's going to teach us how to find, tease, build, or create one. So, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am going to spotlight you right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. I am really pleased with the incredible scope of work that you do. Fiction, nonfiction, and various kinds of fiction, from memoir to magical realism to young adult. It's the thing that connects all of this. I mean, many things connect all of this. One thing connects is that it's hard work. It's good work and it's hard work. It's not easy. I have never understood nor believed any writer who has said, oh, I just, it just flows out of me. Because I think if it flows out of you, okay, I won't say, I won't say what I think flows out of people without editing and going through it and all that stuff. So that, but also arc, how you structure a story. That is what arc is. So everyone is working on something, except for Sharon's mother, which we will give her a pass on that. And I can't see, some people are not showing me their little faces here, so this may not work exactly. But I wanted you to raise your hand if you are currently struggling with the way to tell whatever you're trying to tell, this, whatever you are in the midst of writing or thinking about writing, who is burning a lot of brain cells thinking about structure. Yeah. Yep. Well, me too. Every writer all the time. And the reason I don't think it gets easier, because I think that when you do something and you succeed at it, let's say, then you just set the bar higher for yourself. So or I do. So it is constantly a good challenge, and there is no magic to it. When I say it's hard work, I actually am not talking about the writing itself. Writing is hard work. I'm talking about the thinking that goes into conceptualizing what the story is. I think that's much harder. Much harder. And that's the staring out the window kind of work. That's the work where you can't say, I was so productive, I wrote these many words, because you're probably not writing any words. You're just, thinking about it on a long car trip or in a bath or on a hike or just someplace that gives you the freedom to imagine. Suppose I told it this way. Suppose I started like this. Okay, so I want to separate out and talk separately about two things. One is plot and one is arc. And the problem with using the word plot is I can also say you have to plot an arc using it as a verb. So I need to find another word for that because plot is the stuff. Plot is everything that happens. And arc is how to structure what happens. So I think a quick and easy example of this would be if you were writing a biography or actually a memoir for that matter, like a biography of yourself, autobiography. So the material of a biography, I've written two of them, is everything from the birth to the death of this person. So they were born, they went to this school, they did this, they had this job, they moved across the country, they had failures, they had successes, da 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 da. That is plot. It's not arc. And so you kind of need to know what the plot is, what the sequence. So plot is a sequence of events. You need to know. You need to think about what those are, but that's not what you write. I think the only time, and even if you think you're writing this, I'm going to give an example from my own work. I wrote one sports book in my life, and it was the easiest book in the world to structure because it was a season in the life. So the book begins at the beginning of the season. It was women's basketball, collegiate basketball, and it ends at the end of the season. Thank you. That's my chronology. And it goes game by game, kind of, but who wants to read game by game? Like only somebody who is a very devoted fan of basketball or women's basketball or this, So there's an arc that needs to be told. Is it an arc? And there are many arcs. There are the arcs of the characters themselves. There is a political arc going on, a fight within the academic world about women's sports. There are all kinds of things going on and interplay with the plot of the season begins, they win, they lose, they win, they lose, the season ends. So beginning, win, lose, end is not an arc. Okay, so let's look at plot versus arc and then focus on arc. I'm going to share. And you'll have to let me get on here. Oops. Little spinning wheel here. What's going on? We did test this. Nope, I want to go back. Thank you. Hold on. All right. Sorry, guys. That's not where I wanted to start. And now my escape button. There we go. All right. Let's start one more time on there, just the correct place. There we go. Okay, everybody see that, I hope? Good. All right. So it is said, I didn't make this up, there are 7 basic plots. Not sure I believe that, but I'll tell you, we'll get into that. So as I said, a plot is a sequence of events. Great. And I feel you need to know that or discover it as you continue writing. The arc is the path of the story, the structure that essentially captures readers and keeps them involved. It creates tension, complication, conflict, resolution. That is an arc, and we'll break down the arc in a minute. I think, my opinion, from a lot of years of writing, is knowing the plot makes the arc visible. It is sometimes difficult to see the arc until you have the material of it. Now, if you're creating, and this comes from my life as basically a nonfiction writer, if you are starting from a work of imagination where you can decide, you can create a character, and you can create the arc that that character or that town or that family goes through, that's a little bit different. You still need an arc, and you still need to fill it in with plot, but it is possible that you can use the arc, you can find the arc first. I've never found an arc first. So here are the maybe 7 plots. Um, and so overcoming the monster doesn't necessarily mean an actual monster. It could mean a powerful threat. So overcoming the monster could be a story of a community fighting against environmental degradation, and that's overcoming the monster. Rags to riches doesn't need any explanation. A quest can be literal, like you're going after something, or it's generally far more nuanced unless you're writing a certain kind of genre, because a quest can be internal. Same thing with voyage and return. In the book that I wasn't actually going to talk that much about, but it's my latest book, um, Everything Changes Everything. There is a voyage in there. There's a 500-mile solo hike. There's a return to my life. So there's a literal step-by-step voyage, but that's not actually the most important part of the book. So it's the otherwise voyage. There's a voyage of emotional, psychological voyage. Comedy, tragedy, and transformation. Supposedly those are the 7 within our well, I was going to say within our Western canon, but I think it's broader than that. I do think that the best adventure for any of those things that talk about adventure and quest and voyage and all that kind of stuff is really the adventure that is often inside us or our characters. That is that people read to learn about life, their own or others, or fabricated characters, and what happens inside them and how they change is tremendously important. So internal and external. Susan Sontag wrote about her voyage to the land of the sick when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I thought that when I read that many, many years ago, I thought that was a really powerful way of looking at what was happening to her. See what you think about this. Every story has to be discovered twice, first in the world and then in the author's study or room or head or whatever. So I think about it in the world because I go out into the world and I write nonfiction. But I think that that holds true for fiction writers as well, because you're in the world looking for stories, and then you're making the story. So it has to be discovered twice. I have a lot of thoughts about this idea that the heart of the story is a place you arrive at, not a place to begin. Because in one way, that argues for, well, wait a second, you're saying I should start writing something when I don't know like what it is, and I'll just get there somehow. No, I think more like what I write at the bottom here. You begin with some kind of a roadmap, and maybe it's a really detailed roadmap. Maybe you know the whole plot, but you have to be prepared to change course, and you want to change course because writing is an act of discovery. If it were not an act of discovery, then we would just be typing, right? If we know everything, we know what our characters are going to go through, we know what the heart of the story is, we know where it takes place, we know, what the climax is. So then what are we doing? We're sitting in a chair typing that out. And that's not how we work. That's not how the art works. You write yourself into a place of knowing. When you finish writing something, whether it's the afternoon or the week or the finished product, you know more than you knew at the beginning. And I think that's wonderful. You can disagree. Yeah. And so be willing to surprise yourself and be willing to shift gears or have somebody shift for you. In this newest book, I handed in the manuscript to my editor, who I loved, loved, loved. And she loved the manuscript. And she said, there is something that's missing here. And I'm not really sure what it is, but we talked about it. A good editor doesn't tell you what to do. A good editor prompts you to think about what to do. And it turned out that the chapter that I wrote, which is actually chapter 17 out of 20 something or another, so it wasn't the last chapter, is actually the strongest chapter in the whole book because I'm writing it after the book, after I wrote the whole book. So I know so much more. And she was right. There was a hole in the middle of the narrative that needed something. And I became smart enough. She was smart enough to see the hole, and I was smart enough to be able to fill the hole because I had already written the whole manuscript. So it's sort of a backward way of doing it. Okay, so the 7 plots. Okay, you're looking at your work and you say, well, wait a second. I don't have a plot that does any of those things. Maybe I don't have a book. And the other thing that you may have learned in English class is there really are 4 plots: man versus self, man versus man, man versus nature, and man versus society. So I guess women are, not in there. Um, and that's what I learned in English class, like in high school. Those are the plots. And maybe, I mean, sort of, I guess. But what if your story doesn't have, or you don't want that obvious drama that everybody recognizes as a story? What if you look at those 7 basic plots, or the person versus self, person versus person, etc.? It doesn't fit. This comes from something I read from Tracy Kidder, who just recently died, who I thought was a stunning writer. And if you've not read any of his work, he wrote a book about narrative nonfiction writing. And what he said is, if you think you're not following one of these plot lines, what's missing is not a story. What's missing is a broader way of thinking about what makes a good story. And actually, what's missing is the arc. Plot, plot, plot. The plot may not be all that exciting. Is there an arc here? And the arc is what brings the excitement. So I think these things are key to arc. And we're going to, in a moment, I'll break down the pieces of the arc for you. So don't worry about that. When we talk about conflict and resolution, people look at an arc and they say conflict. Well, there's no fighting going on. There's no, what do you mean by conflict? Well, conflict could be your inner voice telling you can't do something and you fighting against that inner voice. That's conflict. Something has to be at stake, which is what keeps the reader reading. You want your reader to be saying to themselves, I wonder what happens next. Because that's an invitation for them to turn the page or scroll or, keep listening, whatever form the material is in. What happens next? And in my example of a biography, what I was talking about, the person is born, goes to school, gets a job, moves to a town, loses their money, gains their money again. Well, I mean, that's a sequence of events. How does it move? How does it go not just from plot point to plot point, but from challenge to tension to momentum to failure to, so that is putting the arc on top of the plot, if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, you should raise your hand and tell me. So I'll just, you're going to see this again because the next group of slides is about the arc. So that's not actually an arc, is it? It's a pointy hat. It's a story mountain. And this works for fiction and nonfiction. I was thinking about like probably maybe everybody who's here in this workshop, but almost everybody I know. I was thinking about a Mary Oliver poem and Mary Oliver as a poet. And I could take any of her poems and do a story mountain on it, even ones that are 5 lines. And if you don't know Mary Oliver, you will thank me for the rest of your life by looking her up and reading her. Okay, so that's story mountain. And we are going to climb the mountain. Let me pause for a second and get rid of this and ask you questions before we move into the arc itself. I'm going to get rid of that. Don't look at my sloppy stuff. Move this someplace over here. Are you seeing any questions?
If anybody has a question, you can use your little hand raising tool at the bottom.
Yes, your little, I think it's a
Oh,
yellow.
yeah, Sarah has a
There's
quick
one.
question. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I apologize if this is too granular of a question, but one book project that I have and that has failed for now. It's gone through 3 iterations. It's literally in a drawer. Um, I know that I had an emotional arc and I know that I had a plot, but I don't know that I successfully did what you said so succinctly and well in the beginning, and that like plot is what happens, arc is how to structure what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I tried structuring it several different ways, but I don't think I actually achieved a plot arc that worked with the emotional arc of the book, if that makes sense. And I don't know how to solve that yet. It is something I still think about, but I'm in the middle of another book now and it's backburnered. But I wonder if that's a problem you've encountered and what you've done about it.
Every problem that you could possibly imagine about finding a structure for a story, I guarantee you, I have experienced it. One of the things that helps me, I'll show you instead of, okay, so this is about the narrative arc. And I think that one of the things that I do sometimes, and this really helps, sometimes I need to do work that's not in front of my computer that helps me that helps me write, right? And so here's like a very, very simple idea for an arc: beginning, middle, end, and then I'll talk about the various parts on it. And I write this on a big piece of paper, with a pencil, and I start putting notes, like, and I'll tell you what I mean by exposition and inciting incident and all that kind of stuff. But I just scribble little notes to myself on there without committing anything. It seems like when I commit something, like I actually move my fingers over a keyboard, it feels like a big commitment. If I have a pencil in my hand and I'm sitting on the floor messing around with a big piece of paper, it feels actually very freeing to me. And I can say, well, wait a second, was that really the crisis there? Well, maybe not. And on rising action, I get what that is from the plot. Or I get that, yeah, I get what that is, but where do I need backstory? Certainly I need backstory someplace there. I wonder where it would fit. And then I start placing it there, scribbling. So I don't know if that idea helps you at all, but getting away from the actual words on the screen and just freeing yourself to brainstorm possibilities works for me. So I pass that along. Okay, so this is an arc. And there's the other more colorful arc. So here's what I mean. So here's a
Lauren,
story
I
that
don't think we can see your slides anymore.
well, that's,
Is anybody seeing them, or is that just me that can't? Okay, no slides.
I'm sorry, what?
We can't see your slides anymore.
Uh, okay. Well, I
I
don't know
think
what to say
I
about
think you
that.
stopped sharing them when you went to questions.
Uh, no. Okay. I didn't stop sharing anything, but we'll share again.
There we go.
All right. Um, but I do want it to be the whole thing. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I didn't do anything when I was answering the question. I just stood here.
Yep.
Are you okay with this now?
Yep, they're great. Yeah, we see them clearly. Thanks.
Okay, so I was thinking about plotting some little story that we all know on the narrative arc to make it easier. I have to say I made up the end. So because I felt like it needed a better ending. So uh, so we're going to break this down, but the exposition start off with there are pigs and they need to move out of their mother's house. And the rising action is one house is built, the other house is built, the other house is built. The wolf destroys one, destroys the other. And then the climax is he's trying to destroy the last one and can't. And meanwhile, the pigs have created a cauldron underneath on some of these examples. And the wolf goes down the chimney and gets boiled. Um, and then I don't know how good wolf would taste to a pig because I actually think pigs are herbivores, but I just had to make a little ending to there. So, but that's what I mean by rising action, climax, falling action. But we are going to break that down in a second. I just wanted to give you a few homey examples. Okay. Why is it? Yeah, this is weird. Okay. This is the Cinderella arc, which doesn't look all that archy, but it is. And for those of you that do math, which wouldn't include me, there's like an x-axis and a y-axis, if I'm remembering from a very long time ago. And so on one thing you see misery and ecstasy, so good and bad. And the other is the time. Okay. So the exposition, the opening is we see Cinderella and the evil sisters. The inciting moment is the invitation to go to the ball. Then there's rising action. I'm thinking of the cartoon version because I'm not sure I ever read the story, but all of the little animals that help make the beautiful gown and the fairy godmother. And she finally goes to the ball, and up there, it looks like that's the climax. Yay. It was a hard road up there. She goes to the ball. She dances with the prince or king or whoever he is, prince. Oh, very good, but no, she has to go. So boom, the action falls down, but she doesn't go back to the same place. That's the cool part of this story. She does go back to the life with the sisters, but she's changed in some way. She's not as sad as before. She's had a great experience. She knows there's a wider world. And then the king finds her or tries the shoes on for everybody, and she has the most beautiful, delicate feet, and she gets to be the princess. So that's one arc. Kurt Vonnegut, you can Google this because I think he does a video on this. Obviously, he's no longer with us, so he did the video years ago. But he explains these arcs, which I love because they're just so simple. So the red line is man in whole. Oh, and you see the axes here. So from bad to good. And I really don't know why he put electricity there because it's beginning and end. So I didn't want to change Kurt Vonnegut because he's too wonderful. Man in hole. Okay, so here he is. Then he falls in a hole. He gets out of a hole. That's a story, I guess. And that's one arc. It's like an upside down arc. The boy gets girl, and we'll also say that's boy gets boy and girl gets girl, and forget about the genders at all. It's a relationship. So we're just going to call it boy gets girl. Boy gets girl, boy loses girl. They come together again. Like every romantic comedy that you've ever seen on the screen is like this. And that's the arc. He thinks, and I'm wondering if you think, that the most popular story, most popular arc in Western civilization is this green one. And that's the slow climb of somebody from like ill fortune, poverty, obscurity, disability. I mean, something that's holding them back. A slow climb full of challenges, and they make it, and then they fall, and then they go back again. Then they get back again. This happens to like every celebrity that that we track, and we kind of, by we, I don't mean necessarily any of us, but in our culture we seem to love that. We celebrate the celebrity and can't wait till that person screws up, and then that person then needs to climb back into our good graces, like a Tiger Woods story, for example, which he hasn't really climbed up yet. Or and basically most celebrities, because they will in some way publicly mess up, and we're all waiting for that. But then we cheer them on again at the end. So that's Kurt Vonnegut, and he's really quite funny when he narrates it, much better than me. If you want to just Google Kurt Vonnegut's arcs and you will find it. Okay, so here we go. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. Very simple. I mean, it's not simple, but it's simple. So for exposition, that's obviously the beginning of the story, where the characters and the setting are introduced. I'm not sure that it's told in expository prose, because I could see opening, and I have opened a story with a piece of dialogue that just presents the characters in some setting talking about something. So that is not expository prose, but it is kind of like a stage where the curtains open. So if you think about a play, that's the beginning. And what's happening on the stage could be a sword fight, or it could be, somebody talking to somebody, or two people kissing, or anything. But it is how it starts. And readers have incredibly short attention spans, and they are just full of reasons to stop reading. So let's not give them any reason. Rising action has to do with the, let's not call it conflicts, let's call it challenges. And it looks like a straight line. It's never a straight line. A straight line would be really boring, because a straight line would be challenge, success, challenge, success, challenge, success. Readers hate flawless characters, and there are no flawless characters. So the character you discover in real life, or the character you are creating for your work, has flaws and will not be able to meet every challenge, whether it's an external challenge or an internal challenge, with success, but will be trudging on as we learn more about them and about human nature, and as we move along in the plot. Most exciting part of the story, and then the falling action. This is the falling action, sometimes called the denouement, French. And that line is actually generally quite a bit shorter. If you're thinking about, say, a movie that you've seen, most of the, let's call it 2-hour movie, most of those 2 hours is the rising action and the climax, and the last 10 minutes is the falling action and the resolution. End of story. So these are the elements we're talking about. The opener, I think it's better to call it opener than exposition. The opener, the inciting incident, the rising action, the climax, falling action, resolution. I need to drink something. Everybody with me so far? I don't hear any screams, so I'm continuing. Okay. So the story, the book, the poem, the screenplay, fill in the blank, the opener. This is for the arc. And as I said before, the curtain goes up, the scene is set. Generally, the main character is introduced. And I know sometimes, so I teach writing workshops, and I'll be reading the beginning of something, and it'll turn out that the person who's writing it, the writer, is spending all this time introducing a minor character. And it really angers a reader to find that out later. They invested a whole lot of energy into getting to know somebody who plays a minor part. So if you're going to spend a lot of time and words, it should be, a main character. It is often important to make clear what the status quo is from which the story will move. So Cinderella, with her, where she is with her evil stepsisters, that's the status quo. This does not have to be obvious at all. A lot of this is quite nuanced. So I'm not suggesting that you take this and say, okay, I have to do 3 paragraphs of scene setting, and then I have to introduce my character, and then I have to make sure that It's more like keep this in mind when you open a story, because this is important to move from. What I'm going to do, because I'm going to use a book of mine, this is not my most recent one, to take you through some of this. So this is the book that I'll be talking about. This was not this book, not obviously, everything changes everything, but the book before that. And very briefly, as you can see, 2 years, 6 lives, and the long journey home. This is narrative nonfiction. It comes from work I did at running a writers group at a maximum security prison, and realizing that a lot of people who spend most of their lives incarcerated get out at some point. And how do they remake their lives? How do they become people again? So I followed 6 people for 2 years to find out what it meant to them and how they managed to be free. And I'll come back to that as I start about this. So the opener was, that's the prison, which is it's quite old. That building was built in the early 1900s, and the rest of the prison is much bigger than that. Okay, so when this book opens, it opens with 2 characters. One character is getting out of prison. You see him walking to get out of prison, and another character is watching that character walk out of prison. And there's backstory for both of them, but it's a scene. It's the scene of this one guy's getting out, and he's one of the 6 people. Okay, so that's the opener. Now we come to the inciting incident. You will remember that we're talking about, oops, like the invitation to the ball, the inciting incident. What gets the book moving, or the story moving? The spark that ignites the story. For those of you who are Sherlock Holmes fans, the game is afoot. I read somewhere, and I don't know who wrote it, but maybe you know, all stories begin with the character either leaving or arriving, which I'm not sure. I mean, I know that's not true, but if you think about a lot of what you read or see or hear in podcasts, I'm talking about narrative podcasts, it often involves somebody arriving or leaving, because it changes things. And then everybody has to figure out what's going on. So inciting incident. So the inciting incident is actually that one of the characters, Arnaldo, is released. And I'm hoping that the readers will say to themselves, okay, what's going to happen to this guy? He's been in for 26 years. He's going out to a world that is quite foreign to him. And his very close friend who's watching this is left behind. Very complicated case, been in prison since 16. Will he ever gain release? So it's sort of a tipping point in a way. And now we're ready to follow 6 people. And in that arc, that upward line of the arc, we're looking at them, the challenges that they face, from really simple things you wouldn't think about. I will mention one of the women gets out. She'd been in prison since she was 13. She's 31. She gets out. And her parents pick her up, and they stop at like a 7-Eleven. And she stands in front of the candy counter, and she can't make a decision about what kind of candy she would like, because she hasn't made a decision in her life since she came to prison. Because you don't make choices in prison. You're told what to do. And I thought that was startling. So it's not, it's like the big decisions about, where should I live, or what job should I try to have, or should I go back to school? I'm just talking about, should I have a Hershey chocolate bar or a M&Ms? They face challenges in housing, employment, and friendship, and they fail, and they don't know. Nobody goes back to prison. I was not interested in writing that story because that's the story that we hear so much. But as they deal with these things, we learn from them. And now we come to, so that was the rising action. We have 6 characters. This was a tough, this was tough structurally for me. So we couldn't just have, I structured it thematically, and I didn't use all 6 characters for every challenge. I was down on the floor scribbling stuff for a lot of days, I want to say, to get this thing together. It did not come easily. So the character reaches the last challenge or the obstacle and succeeds or not. I mean, not every story is about success. The success really is whether the reader stayed with you and whether the reader learned something about the way humans think and act and feel and care. That's really what whether the characters end up incredibly successful or not is kind of, not the point. So change, movement and change are what ARC is about. Movement and change. And if you don't have those, it's really hard to keep the reader. So this is Sterling, one of the character we meet at the very beginning with a very, very complicated case, and it's thread through this story because he doesn't get released until the very, very end, and we don't know that he was going to get released. I didn't know that he was going to get released, but this is sort of the climax. And this is who greeted him when he was released. It was raining, of course. This happened in Oregon. All of my characters were not in Oregon, but he was. And just so you know, these are the people that I followed, obviously after they got out of prison, in the lives they made. The bottom middle one is the woman who was incarcerated since she was 13. And one of the things that's most interesting about growing up in prison, Sterling was 16 when he went to prison, and in the far right corner, that guy was 17, I think. You're out of sync with your age cohort. You're not experiencing what your age cohort is experiencing. So very, very soon after she got out of prison, she started having kids because she was out of sync with her age group, and she had 2 in pretty quick succession, and then established herself in a career and had 2 more. Well, they were twins, so that was a good pregnancy. Not 2, but those are the 6 of them. Resolution is a tough one. That's the last one. That's the denouement. And this is where we tread ever so lightly, because, unless we're writing some sort of a self-help book or something, which I've never done, you don't want to be lecturing a reader. Readers do not want to be lectured, but you told the story for a reason, didn't you? You felt that there was, something has changed, something's different. Your characters have learned something. You've learned something. How can you get that across toward the end of the book that's not as the sun sinks slowly in the western sky, we say goodbye to our wonderful characters, or, like a neat bow that ties up a story. I think you leave people with questions, but not questions like, I'm confused, I don't know, but, now I need to think more about what I thought I knew, like, say, incarceration, or in this latest book about grieving. I thought everybody was like crying and depressed and unhappy and, I can't move forward and goes to therapy. That's what I think of grieving is. Well, maybe not. Maybe there's other ways of grieving. So I like the idea of leaving a window open, but not confusion. And I think that's what resolution does. And so here's what I was hoping. What have these stories told us about this journey? And I don't answer those in that way, right? I let the stories try to answer that. And I leave a lot for the readers to chew over, chew on. What are we doing here? Good. Okay, I'm stopping so that you can't see my very, very sloppy. So here's another thing that I do that might be useful to you. And it's another one of these ideas of not staring at a computer and hoping that some aha moment happens to you so that you can write the next sentence, or that you now know what the next chapter is going to be. I'm really a fan of moving away from that and freeing my brain. So one way is that gigantic piece of paper, like a butcher, whatever you call those butcher papers, with magic markers. And if I'm really stuck, I go to the store and buy different color magic markers so that I can play around with it. Not that this helps at all, but it keeps my mind busy. The other thing that I do is when I have like the plot, and so let's take that season in the life thing because it's easiest to see. So there's X number of games. Some of them are home games, some of them are away games. And I have file cards, 8, whatever size they are, 5x8 file cards, not the tiny ones, medium ones. And I write plot points on each of those file cards, like with my hand and a pencil, scribble. Or I write little notes to myself, like father's influence, for example. And that's, so I have father's influence, I have a game, I have however many, let's say there's 30 games, there weren't. Let's say there are 20 games, and each one of those is a file card. And then there's what I know about backstory for any of the players. And I'm just writing little notes to myself, not trying to put them in any order whatsoever. Or when I wrote this book, it was a political fight within the university to recognize the coming power of women's sports. And so there's a whole bunch of turmoil that way, and there was legal cases, et cetera. So I have those on little file cards. And then I'm sitting on the floor, and I have pictures of myself sitting on the floor with a big pile of file cards, kind of playing with them. Like, suppose I started here, then what would come after that? So I put another file card there. And I have like this long line of file cards across my carpet. And I look at them, and this is not for the whole book, for example, but let's say for a chapter or two. And I'm not committing any words on paper. It just, I can't describe how freeing that is. Because I look at it and I think, that actually doesn't work all that well. Suppose what I thought was going to come in the 4th place comes in the 8th place, and I move this other file card over to here. Now I'm going to read it through, imagining, because I know what the depth is for each one of those file cards. I'm not writing the text of it. I'm thinking about what the text would be. So I've told many people about this, told my husband, and this is probably not why he fell in love with me, but I think he really loved this. And one of the things that he had his office next to mine in this house. And it was a joy for me to walk in and see him on the floor with a whole bunch of file cards. So I'm into file cards and butcher paper. And those are my two. I give you these secrets to my writing life. Okay. Questions about the arc, about your work, a particular challenge you're having, without going too much into the weeds, but any way that I might be able to assist you, or that your colleagues here could assist you.
Lauren? Lauren, do you hear me?
Yes.
It's Susan. I just had a question about your, I think you said you followed the book, followed 6 people. Um, Not all of them in the story had, the climax and coming to the end. I was curious about that. So that meant, did you have one character, main character, and the other 6 were just part of the story? How do you decide not to let us know what happens to the rest, unless you're planning on writing future books about them?
No, you know what happens to everybody.
Oh, you
You
do,
do know it. Yeah, yeah,
but they
yep.
don't all need that solid um, arc. Is that what you were
Well,
saying?
yes and no. They all have personal arcs, right? Because there's a status quo for each one. They're in
Mhm.
prison, right? There's the inciting moment for each one. They get the word that they're coming out. There's the rising action for each one. They face challenges along the way. And I would I would say that each one of them had one major challenge that they were pretty much able to figure out. So each one of those was a smaller arc. So you do find out. The challenge really wasn't how to tell that, because I thought, okay, so is it going to be divided into 6 parts, and part 1 will be this person, and
Yeah.
follow the arc, and that ends, and then part 2 will be this person. And I tried that on the floor with file cards, and it just really didn't feel good to me at all. So what I thought about was what challenges did they have in common, and what challenges
Mm.
were common challenges that they met in very different ways because they are very different people. So it was much more organized by challenge, and you got the arc when you stood back from the book and saw it, if that
Okay.
makes sense. So relationships, a very big challenge,
Okay.
but in very different ways. One of the men had been a closeted gay man in a very small town, and he went to prison at the height of the AIDS. Not the height, but he went in prison when everybody was petrified to even touch a a man. And he came out with like men kissing each other on the streets.
Mm.
And he had no gaydar, radar for other gay men. In fact, I met him several times, and he would ask me, like, he would tell me about some conversation he had, and he would say, "So, do you think that guy's interested in me or not?" So he had to learn about relationships from almost nothing. And then we had somebody who got married. We had somebody who had babies almost immediately. So the way they dealt with relationships was quite different, but relationships became conceptually part of the book. So the big arc is you're in prison, you get released, you meet challenges, you don't go back to prison, you find out how to craft a life. That's the big thing. And within that, you experience the different people.
Thanks.
Great,
Sure.
great question. Thanks, Susan. Dorothy, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'm very interested in the bottom part of the arc, the resolution. I read a lot of mystery thriller, and it feels like they almost always end with justice and a happy ending. And my book does definitely not have that. Do you think that the reader will come away dissatisfied or like it's incomplete? What do you think about happy endings versus just ending?
I think happy endings feel forced.
Yeah.
And I think readers are smart. And when you tie everything in a bow for them, I think they do feel maybe momentarily, it's like junk food. Momentarily, it tastes really good, but then you didn't get anything out of it. As long as your character, as long as we learn something, I would say, and as long as, you hate or a reader would really dislike a character they loved not succeeding in some way, like just dying a horrible death at the end, right?
No, I don't kill characters at the end. I just make them wicked.
Okay, good. All right, don't kill. But no, I am not a fan of happy endings that way. There's, the book Chemistry Lessons. That
Yes.
was huge, big.
Lessons in Chemistry. Yeah.
I love that whole book until the ending. And the ending was like the author, and I don't even remember what the ending was, but I railed against the ending to people that were reading it at the same time because it was such a great book. I love the dog. The dog was the best character. And I loved the female character, but at the end it was like, really, you have to wrap it up for me? No, it was a wonderful story. Just stop. So that was really disappointing to me. So yeah, make them wicked.
Thanks.
I'll read it. Okay, you have a reader of one here.
Okay.
There you go, Dorothy. Make a note of that.
Monica,
you've got a question? I see your hand up.
Yeah, I do. Thanks for coming and doing this. I am sorry I joined late. I had forgotten, and then we were talking about a murder that we watched last night where the character gets a dog, and I thought, save the cat. And I thought, oh no, because Sharon always talks about save the cat. So I'm here because of Save the Cat. But I did get to listen to the arc, and I'm writing something where I have three characters who are sort of, it's a linked short stories, three characters who are mirroring each other in some way. Do you have any advice about should I do those arcs separately? I mean, because the stories are interspersed. And so I'm trying at this point to figure out how to make those characters work when they keep playing off from each other.
do they play off each other at the same time in the same space, or
No.
are they just three separate narratives?
They're separate narratives, and that's because they're separate stories, but they share a lot in common. And I'm thinking, in some way maybe your story about prisoners might be similar in some way, and maybe it has some insight into that.
Well, so I guess I need a little more clarification. So these characters do not know each other, but they might be going through similar life circumstances. But
They do actually, two of them are cousins. One of them doesn't know the other two, though. It's true. So,
well, and are these real people, or are these people from your literary imagination?
no, they're from my imagination.
Oh, good. Well, then you can do anything you
I
want.
can do a lot of stuff. Yeah, I do have that freedom.
So they probably somehow, in my opinion, need to be in the same space with each other at the same time, maybe accidentally. In some way interact. Maybe it's actually physically being together. Maybe it's through emails. Maybe somebody's finding out about somebody. But unless you want to write a triptych with 3 separate stories that have beginning, middle, end, and now chapter, section 3, section 4, then they need to have some way of interacting. I don't think you as a writer have to come in and say, see, they're all dealing with same things and look at how different they are. You trust the reader to get that. But unless you want to, really silo them, you need to find a way to bring them together a little bit. Is what I would say.
Okay. All right. That's
that
interesting.
helps.
Well, it actually does help, because the third person who doesn't know either of them has had a brief encounter. And I'm just writing her story. It's 5 flash stories together. And I keep thinking, well, maybe I just need to stick that somewhere in the middle, because she doesn't really interact with them. The other 2 are cousins. They meet each other at weddings and funerals, so I can get them interacting. But
why don't you try my famous, well, it's not famous, it's famous in my own mind, my file card thing. So you've got these 3 stories, and just like throw the file cards in the air and then start putting them in some order. And you might really surprise yourself. You might come up with something very cool that you can't think of if you're staring at words on a screen.
Yeah, exactly. I do love that idea. I mean, I'm very visual and I like that. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
And if anybody
Anybody
does
else?
this, and has,
Sorry, Lauren.
that's okay. If anybody actually follows through on this and does it, I would love to hear from you.
Oh,
because I'm a big fan. But I guess, as you're thinking about if there's another question that I can answer, just I guess maybe this helps. I don't know. Maybe it's like misery loves company. I'm not sure. But structure is one of the hardest things. It's so much harder than writing a scene or crafting dialogue or any sort of writing challenge, which is already hard. Structure is harder, and there's not one structure that works. The arc can help you think about reader involvement and keeping eyes on the page or the screen. But my experience with arcs is it's not as simple as man falls into hole, man gets out of hole. It's not that way at all. It really is the sort of the game we play with our readers. Let me grab you, let me keep you, let me satisfy you. Kind of, that sounds like super sexual, but I didn't mean it that way. But that's it. That's really it. They have to be thinking, what happens next? I wonder what would happen. I wonder what that person's thinking. I wonder why they did that. And then you satisfy that question, or you complicate that question.
So
Keep their
Lauren,
eyes on the page.
if somebody else has questions, please raise your hand. But I think that using your work as examples, I think is really, really helpful to illuminate this. So do you want to talk about your latest book? Because that is a memoir. And so could you talk a little bit about maybe how you use some of these techniques in your index cards and figured out how to structure that and sort of, hook in the audience with this story of, a real story of what happened and then, deliver that reader satisfaction at the end as well.
We hope the reader
We hope.
satisfaction.
I'm sure. We are sure.
Buy the book, be satisfied, and write back to me that you are, and that will be good. So this was the most complicated structural thing for me. The spine of the book, the movement of the book is forward, and it is my 500-mile solo walk on the Camino de Santiago. We don't go day by day at all. And each time that we are on that walk, or I am on that walk and you're coming with me, it is to learn something. It is to learn about maybe the culture I'm walking through. It is to learn about the people that I meet, or it is to learn about how I am dealing with life's consequences. That's the spine. And then there are two other, it's a braided book. There are two other narratives. One is my husband and one is my daughter. And my husband's story is told backwards. So when you meet my husband, he's dead. He has died. And my statement about that is that to know the character of this man is to understand how he died and how he chose to die. So I start with the death. So you're not wondering. And then I go backward in time. My daughter, who also died 8 months after my husband died, her story is told forward because it is a story of domestic abuse and addiction. And that escalates. It starts small. It starts with a little thing and gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it ends poorly. That is told forward. I think, and this was a whole lot of file cards, I will tell you. I think what I tried to do was have a Camino, a Tom, a Lizzie, a Camino, a Tom, a Lizzie, like that, but it didn't always work that way. I did feel that my readers needed a break from, death and grieving to be walking on the Camino. And some of that stuff is funny. I mean, I hope it's funny. People have said it's funny. So there's an arc to all three of those stories. But the big arc is really, you start with a family of five, which I am the mother of the family of five, and that's the setting the scene. Challenges happen, things happen, climaxes, bad ones happen, deaths happen, and then the family survives. That's the big arc. And you find out about it through these three pieces, through these three stories. So there's a Mary Oliver poem, which there is a Mary Oliver poem for everything. And I had it, I spilled milk all over it. Oh, here it is. Oh, it's only 4 lines. We shake with joy, we shake with grief. What a time they have, these two, housed as they are in the same body. You almost don't want to be a writer anymore when somebody can do that. and that's really sort of how I feel about the book. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful to sort of see how you think through this arc and the framework of your book, and not necessarily, I mean, there are so many ways that you could tell that story of a journey. So I think that's really helpful to see that. I want to be cognizant of your time because I know you have another important place to be. So I think this
Not
is
as
a good
important as
place
this.
to wrap up. Sorry?
I was going to say not as important as this. It's
No,
just
well,
I
obviously,
do
but
want to just throw in one more thing, which I think that Lisa mentioned, that I have a Substack. If you don't know Substack, probably most of you do. It's a literary marketplace, and the marketplace part is the tough part for me. I do not, I'd love you to subscribe. I do not charge for any subscriptions. Everybody gets all my content free. And in fact, I wrote why I do this in my Substack essay for, is today Wednesday? No, today's Thursday, yesterday. So I post an original essay every Wednesday. And as I struggle with so many things, I struggled with, should I monetize this? Because that's how I make my living as a writer. And I had some reasons why I don't monetize it. And I would, for those of you who are trying to make a living writing, or those of you who are on Substack who do monetize, I would love feedback on this, because I don't have the answers here. I just have questions. I'm just, moving along, trying to make sense of stuff, and, occasionally making sense. I hope I made sense. I hope I made sense tonight. And you can reach out to me through my website if you want to. I do run writer workshops, more specifically about the art and craft of writing, in between my writings. You can find out about that too if you'd like to. But thank you all for being here.
And I've just dropped your Lauren's website and her Substack links into the chat so you can find them there. So I'm going to just remove your spotlight, Lauren, so you can see everybody. And everybody, if you want to just unmute yourselves and just say thank you to Lauren. This was so helpful, so interesting, lots to think about. There's going to be a run on index cards tomorrow morning, I suspect. But thanks so much for your time and your wisdom and sharing your stories. And yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so
so
much.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.